after such a big gap. So I'm privileged to welcome on the dais our speaker today, Mr. R. Gopalakrioshnan. I request Professor Jairam Chenglur, our director, and Professor Mayank Vaya, who is the president of TIFR Alumni Association, to accompany Mr. Gopalakrioshnan to the dais. Thank you. This is a special day for us when we remind ourselves of the great vision and immense contributions of our founder, Mr. JRD Tata, to the formation of this institute. Over the last 75 years, this institute has produced alumni who have made our country very proud of their achievements in academia, industry, and public life across the globe. And TIFR Alumni Association attempts to keep the alumni in touch with the institute. So lectures like these are also our way of staying in contact with the public, which we consider very, very crucial. So I now request Professor Chenglur to formally welcome Mr. Gopalakrioshnan, and he will bring them. So on behalf of TIFR and thank you, Professor Chenglur. Now I request Professor Chenglur to share his thoughts with you.
I actually don't have much more to say than what Professor Prabhu has just said, so I'll be brief. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to TIFR, both of those of you who are present here in person, as well as those who are joining us online today. I'd especially like to welcome our speaker, Mr. Gopalakrioshnan, who has very kindly accepted TAA's invitation to grace this occasion and to give this year's JRD Tata Memorial Lecture. Of course, today is an occasion to remember JRD Tata, who played a very crucial role in creating and sustaining our institute. But it's also an opportunity for us to reconnect with the TIFR alumni, who form a very important part of the TIFR family. As we all know, the alumni enrich our life at TIFR in many ways, including through organizing thought-provoking talks by eminent speakers. Today's speaker, of course, is no exception, and along with all of you, I greatly look forward to what Mr. Gopalakrioshnan has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chenglur. Now I request Professor Mayank Vaya, who is the president of TIFR Alumni Association, to share his thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As a president of the Alumni Association, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Gopalakrioshnan for agreeing to give this lecture. A few words about a quick recap of what the Alumni Association is planning to do now. First of all, of course, is to remember JRD, who was our chairman for 43 years, and we can't possibly measure the amount of contribution that he has made to us. He's also created one of the finest institute with the help of Homi Baba, and we all, of course, must pay our respects to him. He has also left behind with us. Baba and Tata together have left us with a large collection of modern Indian paintings, and there has been a lot of requests from all over the city and country to make that exhibition available. So Ms. Oindrila is planning a program by which we will make this exhibition open to outsiders. But more importantly, in December, we are planning a review of 75 years of TIFR to look at all the landmarks of TIFR. And we hope that you will join us for the landmarks of TIFR meeting at TIFR Colaba campus in December. So those are some of the things that alumni want to do. They want to sort of pay respects. Out of the 75 years that TIFR has been here, 43 years have been under the guidance of JRD Tata. And we cannot possibly ever calculate the amount of contribution that he has made in so many ways to so many of activities in TIFR. We've had the privilege of listening to him. A great gentleman, of course, but a very shy gentleman. And it was always a privilege to hear JRD. And with those few words, I will now request Prabhu to introduce our speaker to us so that we can begin today's program.
Thank you, Professor Vaya. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Gopalakrioshnan to the audience today. He did his BSc in Physics from St. Xavier's College, Calcutta, and a bachelor's degree in electronics from IIT Kharagpur, and in an advanced management program from the prestigious Harvard Business School in the USA. In 1967, he joined Hindustan Lever Limited as a trainee in the Information Technology Department, from where he began his long and illustrious career. He has traveled widely and worked in India, United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia. Some of the important positions he held during his career include Executive Director of Exports of Hindustan Lever Limited, Chairman, Unilever Arabia, Managing Director, Brook Bond Lipton, India, which was later merged into Hindustan Lever Limited. And then he became Vice Chairman, Hindustan Lever Limited. From 1998 to 2015, he was the Director, Tata Sons Limited, and he has also been a director of several Tata companies. Here I want to make a particular mention of Tata Sons, whose corporate philosophy is somewhat different from other corporate entities. A substantial part of the equity share capital of Tata Sons is held by philanthropic trusts, which support education, health, livelihood generation, and art and culture. And that is already seen as big landmarks in Mumbai. You've already seen those, and also across the country. He has also been keenly involved in public service activities, some of which are member 8 Plan Working Group on Indian Exports, member Rakesh Mohan Committee on Indian Railways, member of Rangarajan Committee on Financial Inclusion, appointed by Government of India, member National Innovation Council under the chairmanship of Mr. Sam Pitroda, who was the then advisor of the Prime Minister, and several others. Now, keenly interested in education, he has also been a member, Board of Governor, Indian Institute of Management, Kolkata, Chairman, Goa Institute of Management, and he is also associated with the Cathedral and John Cannon School of Mumbai. It is impossible for me to speak about all the important positions he has held and the jobs he has undertaken. From what I have said so far, I'm sure that you have got the idea about the high stature of today's speaker. So, and with those words, I now invite Mr. Gopalakrioshnan to deliver his lectures. All the dais is yours.
Thank you very much, Director Jairam, Mr. Wahi, and all those who are involved in setting up this event. It's a great honor to speak on this occasion because it's JRD Tata's birth anniversary. It's a busy day in Tata's. In the evening, we have another function, but I'm grateful that the organizers adjusted the timing so that I could come in the morning. I believe this talk is normally held in the evenings. Three sources from the Gangotri of whatever I want to talk about. And I want to mention those sources in advance. The first is that I have worked for two very long-lasting institutions throughout my career of 50 years plus. Unilever, which was formed around 1860, and Tata's, which was formed in 1868. So I've had a number of observations as a pilgrim of looking at long-lasting institutions. The second is, although I'm not a biologist by training, I've been very fascinated, having studied physics and mathematics and chemistry, that there is this unknown continent called biology. Later on in my career, I got exposed to it. And biology somehow fascinated me because there are lots of reality around us, which have the uncertainties of biology, and happily lives in consonance with avoiding the certainties of physics. So I got very interested in that. And one of the offshoots of such an inquiry is not to actually study cell biology, but to say what makes any institution long lasting. And I've got a little library in my house. Firstly, to live in a flat in Bombay and have a library is a great privilege, but it's a fairly good library. And I've got a section on it which is about long lasting companies. In my case, institutions are interpreted to mean company. And I've got American companies, I've got European companies, I've got Japanese companies, and I've got some Indian companies. So that is the second source of my research and understanding, which has influenced whatever I'm going to say. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you all of these because it would be very boring to sit and listen to everything that one is. And the third thing is, after my retirement from Tata Sons, 7-8 years ago, I was invited to be an executive in residence at the SP Jain Institute of Management at Andheri, Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. And along with 5 academics, I've never collaborated with academics, by the way. Whenever I talk of collaboration, teamwork, it's private sector people. And it was quite an interesting learning experience for me, and I'm sure for my 5 academic colleagues, to collaborate on a project, which we said that there's lots of literature on American, European, and Japanese companies which are long-lasting, but there's no research on what makes an Indian company long-lasting. And management is unlike physics and mathematics, an uncertain science. Actually, it doesn't deserve the word science. I'm totally against calling management a science. It's like a performing art. It's more like Bharatanatyam or Kathakali or playing cricket or tennis or golf. Because you do the same thing again and again, you don't get the same result. You get a different result. So, management of any institution or enterprise, institution can be an academic institution, research institution, but I come from the background of enterprise, involves a lot of ambiguity. Scientists like physicists shun ambiguity, or they're trained to shun ambiguity. Business people have to learn to embrace ambiguity. So we did a study, and that study, research paper and 6 books that were written out of that have also influenced my thinking. So that's the sort of background. But I don't intend to walk you through each of these because that would be not very interesting. It's not an academic conference. I came to this institute at this venue, I think in 2004 or thereabouts, when it was the 100th birth anniversary of JRD Tata. And I had a chance to look around your archives. A similar exhibition was set up. I don't know if that's permanent or set up on occasions. But I got to feeling a great sense of inspiration about how this institution came to be set up. And the interaction between Homi Bhabha and JRD Tata and the Tata Trusts. So I thought it would be a fitting honor, not just to talk about JRD Tata, because he was not my friend, if you see what I mean, or my contemporary. And he died before I joined Tata's anyway. I met him only once when I was a director of Hindustan Lever. But it is good to honor what they did rather than them as individuals. And Bhabha, Sarabhai, JRD Tata, Jamshedji Tata are all people who have set up and nurtured institutions. So I chose the subject of the lessons I've learned on long-lasting institutions to be the subject of what I want to speak about today. And I will do this in 3 parts. I'm not going to read out a speech because I feel bored to read my own speech. But I just want to give you some bullet points in the hope that some parts of it will at least look interesting to the audience who have taken some time off to come and listen to this talk today. So the first part I want to talk about is, why is institution building a national need? That's the first part. The second part is, why Jamshedji Tata is still relevant to India? Because I think he was the original institution builder. And the third part I want to talk about is what it takes to build enterprise in India. And I'm using the word enterprise. You can apply it to a research institution or to an education institution or to a business enterprise. I'm using the word enterprise in a very broad context. So let me start with the first part. I will take about 15 minutes or 10 minutes a piece, so it will finish in, I hope, by 12:30, because I have been promised lunch at the end of it, which I shall look forward to. You know, what is an institution? People ask. And I tell them, listen, I don't have an intellectual answer for it. But think of the Red Fort in Delhi. And imagine a beautiful bungalow in golf links in Delhi. Which is an institution? The answer is self-evident and obvious. So think of VT station in Bombay and think of Igatpuri railway station. Both receive trains and send trains. Both have similar sort of equipment. Which is an institution? The answer is obvious. You think of the Taj Mahal in Agra and you think of a Qabristan. Both are functionally doing the same thing. But you know which is an institution. So the moment you say the word institution, it conjures up in your mind grandeur, grandiosity, long life, sustainability, awe-inspiring, and so on and so forth. And I think to look at enterprises and say which of them are institutions requires them to satisfy some of these criteria. Do they inspire awe? Have they made great social impact as a result of whatever work they were doing? And then you can start to look at the second aspect of what do shapers of institutions do? So what is a shaper? A shaper is the person who originally injected the DNA into the institution. All founders of institutions come with a certain set of values. But like the half-life of radium, that will slowly decline, its effect and its impact. But those who manage to institutionalize those values, the founders' values, will create a long-lasting institution. It is just like in a family. Nobody can say, no parent can say that his or her child will live till the age of 100 or 75 or whatever. But they can institutionalize values in that child so the child can become a responsible citizen of the society in which they are placed. So Shah Jahan will be celebrated as the shaper of the Taj Mahal. But he did not touch a single marble piece, I'm sure, in the making of the Taj Mahal. But he provided the initial vision and the values, which probably, along with other people, Sher Shah Suri never touched a single brick on the GT road. At least there is no evidence of that. But the bricklayers of the GT road made a road which has lasted now for 800 years and is an institution in transportation. And likewise, Homi Bhabha and JRD Tata were shapers of these institutions. I happen to be standing, and I'm very humbled to be standing in one such institution, but people like them and Vikram Sarabhai have shaped many other institutions as well. And therefore, it is in their honor that I speak on the occasion of JRD Tata's anniversary, that institution building was something that they did naturally. I'm not aware that any of them has written a book on how to build a great institution. They were the pilgrims who built it. But I have taken a little bit of the guy who's walking next to the pilgrim to see what does this pilgrim do, so that we can get an idea. You got a great institution here in TIFR. And I learned from Dr. Jairam that there are units in Pune and Bangalore and Hyderabad as well. Well, we want this institution to carry on for 200 years, 300 years. We want it to appear in the top rank of institutions in the world contributing. And that's what it's all about. It's not assured. The fact that Baba and JRD were associated in the beginning doesn't assure it. It's what you do today, the leadership of these institutions, that will matter. Amongst education institutions, you have the Indian Institute of Science. You have my old college, long-lasting college, St. Xavier's in Calcutta. St. Xavier's is there in Bombay as well. St. Stephen's in Delhi. These are all long-lasting institutions. It is not an accident that they're lasting long. So amongst business enterprises, you ask you who are the business enterprises which are long-lasting in India. You probably come up with a list which is predictable. You probably say Tata, Godrej, Bajaj. And then when you come to more modern times, and I did this exercise 4 years ago, I sat with the SPJ and academics and said, which are the institutions which came up around liberalization? And with great difficulty, I'm talking of business enterprises, great difficulties, we could come with 8 or 9 names. Because we had a very stiff set of criteria for something to be called an institution. You don't get recruited to the Indian Test cricket team lightly. I mean, there are a number of criteria and selectors. Now, I have always associated TIFR with particle physics, mathematics, and atomic science. And I'm sure I'm not wrong in doing so. But just to show that if you turn the diamond, you can see a different facet of it. I was talking to a friend of mine who happens to be a researcher in oral cancer and dentistry. And he gave me a paper that he has written called Pratapi Purush. It's about Homi Bhabha in the Bhavan's journal. And people who read that think that TIFR is all about oral cancer. And everything else is incidental. Because the contribution that I'm not an expert on oral cancer, I'm not a dentist, but what he has described and how Homi Bhabha participated in that. I mean, he could not have known that much about oral cancer. That was not his subject. Makes me feel this is TIFR, Tata Institute of Oral Research, fundamental research in oral cancer. Now, anybody who can appear one way to this group, another way to another group, that's really an institution. It's like people say, you want to look at this painting, look at it from this side, look at it from that side, and you'll find a difference. And that's what a great work of art is. And India needs institutions because if in the year 2017, when I was talking to these academics, you found with great difficulty only 7 or 8 business enterprises which are, say, 50 years old and which could qualify as an enterprise, as an institution. We didn't do the same exercise for scientific institutions because basically we were not qualified to do so, but you could do this. And you say research labs that were set up, say 40, 50 years ago, how many of them are looking as though they can become institutions? It's a prediction. It's not a certificate. And we found if it's so difficult, is this the secret sauce that India lacks? It is Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. And I want to present to you the idea that India has not making progress for a large number of reasons, and there are enough people who can talk about it, more qualified than myself. But one of the reasons is we seem to have very few people who can shape institutions. There is social unrest, there is shortage of money, opportunities, population, all that is there. But if you can create, I don't know, this is stupid to say this, 100 TIFRs, 200 Tatas, would we be a different country? And 200 of others also. I'm not saying there are only 2. Don't get me wrong. And when I was very interested in Miss Oindrila and the archives that you have here, and I've been generously invited by your director to come and access anything I want in the archives. Hey, the good news is I'm not going to use PowerPoint charts because I think we are all PowerPointed out of our sanity. That I'm looking at a lot of archival material now. In around early 1900, I think it was 1912, there was a Bengali economist who wrote a letter to the then big economist Alfred Marshall and said, remember, it's a colonial country. The Delhi Darbar had just taken place. King George or Edward or whatever he was crowned king in the Darbar in Delhi. And he said, how can India make rapid progress? That was the question he asked. As you know, an economist is defined as a person who knows the way, but he cannot drive the car. And Alfred Marshall said, you get a score of Tatas and India will progress. And I'm not saying this in a parochial way because I happen to have served Tatas. I'm saying this as Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. How can this country create, not in those days a score might have been enough. We need 10 score or 20 score institutions, not necessarily Tatas. There are many pygmies which look as though they may become institutions. And I'm not using the word pygmy in a pejorative sense. In the work that I have been doing, rather than tell you chronologically or sequentially, because I'm not trying to make a logical presentation, but I'm trying to tell you something that will be hopefully persuasive to you. I said, let's look at the greatest institution builder in the business enterprise area, because that's my subject. You all could look at scientific enterprise, scientific institutions, because you are better qualified to do that. And I asked myself the question, if I was a historian, which I'm not, mercifully for mankind, who would be the 3 or 4 or 5 greatest Indians of the 19th century? Right? 19th century is, say, 1820, 30 till 1910, 1920, approximately that period. The name of Gandhiji would automatically spring to your mind because he was born in 1869 and he lived right up to 1948. Some of these choices might be arguable, but I'm offering it as my point of view. Rabindranath Tagore, who is a contemporary, 1861 to 1941, would probably qualify from the field of literature and arts. Probably Jawaharlal Nehru would feature as a person of great vision and who took part in the independence movement of political thought. But if you had to choose one person from the field of business enterprise, and you could go on choosing greatest Indians in science, and you could Acharya Jagdish Chandra Bose, so on and so forth. But from the world of business enterprise, it would unarguably be Jamshedji Tata. And therefore, there are lessons to be learned because Jamshedji Tata was a contemporary of these greats. He was born in 1839. I have been to the house where he was born in Navsari. He died in 1904, just 2 months before JRD Tata was born, or 2 months after, I've forgotten. And his great contribution was that he impacted what I call conscious entrepreneurship. Dil se karo, conscious entrepreneur. And he counted him so strongly, he impacted it so strongly because he got institutionalized it into the Tata enterprise. It's very difficult to institutionalize it. Huh? You may have a personal style, which is very good, but after you, that sort of goes. You name it, education, employment generation, skilling, all the things we're talking about today, technology and society. And he did this through the method of creating what I call multiple she's, S-H-E. And I use the word she not to doff my cap to feminine power, though it gives that impression and is therefore not a bad packaging. I call she a sustainable and honest enterprise. If you apply that test, sustainable can be profit-making, green, you can attribute any, adjectives to it. honest is a matter of how you see honesty. But I think we all have a generally agreed idea of what an honest enterprise is. And somehow it looks like an oxymoron to many people. To say honest and enterprise, this doesn't go well. It's like saying a very manly woman, it doesn't make sense. And the reason why Jamsetji Tata stands out as probably amongst the greatest Indians of the 19th century, arguable, but in my view, is because he combined the three things of institution building in one man. As many others like Baba and all have done also, but since I'm talking about on Tata's birth anniversary, he had vision, he had execution, and he institutionalized the values so that it will live after him. It's a damn tough combination. You've seen many leaders of your own scientific establishments. You say so-and-so was a fantastic director or chairman of this institution or lab. After him, to combine vision and execution and institutionalize the values so that it lasts not for 20 years, but for 150 years, and hopefully longer, is a class act. And I'm arguing that people like certainly Jamsetji Tata, who have done this and have a track record, he'll be turning in his grave somewhere because he doesn't know such a speech is being made, are exemplars whom the nation puts on Azadi Ka Amrita Mahotsav and celebrates. And I thought I would illustrate to you. I'm writing a book on this, so my mind is full of stuff. But I must be careful to keep to the point and share with you things that I believe leaders in the field of scientific. I'm an alum of IIT Kharagpur. And, people tell you things that this can't be done as government and this and that. I'm sure there are constraints and I'm nobody to judge it. But this is where shapers of institutions come to play a role. Can I say all IITs? Certainly, let me not talk about all IITs because my experience is one IIT. It's a great institution. Yeah. Does it feature somewhere? I would love it to. I'm an alum. But I'm not so sure. And do the generations of directors or leaders have vision and execution and institutionalized values? You can get into a debate. There are 8 P's that I have listed. This is just business management people think of. Some people say vocal for local, Amrit Mahotsav. They have alliterations. I have 8 P's, which bring out to me the prioritization and the way Jamsetji Tata's mind worked. Some of them may be relevant for institutions such as yours, which have already stood the test of time. But I'm talking to you not about whether it's going to be finished in the next 25 years, but in the year 2122, now financial year 2122, will somebody be able to stand here and talk about TIFR with the same pride with which I talk about it, or you talk about it? That is the question in my mind. So what are these 8 P's, these magical P's? The first was purpose. People call it vision. There's another word for it. Ki bhai, karna kya hai? What is this all about? Have I just set up an institution? See, Jamsetji was a man, according to the archival records, who was not fond of public speaking. But in a very rare speech he made in 1885, before the Commissioner of Central Provinces, he said the following. He didn't put Tatas on a pedestal, and neither do I seek to do that. None of us should, because the moment you put somebody on a pedestal, the laws of gravity start operating. We do not claim to be more unselfish, more generous, or more philanthropic than other people. But we think we started our enterprise on sound and straightforward business principles, considering the interests of the shareholders as our own. And the health and welfare of our employees as a sure foundation of our prosperity. He was effectively saying, if Tatas are going to be successful, he didn't use the word profit, he didn't use the word surplus, health and welfare of employees, and sound principles. And then he went on to say, in a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder, but is in fact the very purpose of its existence. This is a social institution. It is meant for the people amongst whom it is sitting. I could go on and on about purpose, but purpose is a very important vision, you could call it if you want. People keep revising the vision of an institution every few years. That doesn't make sense to me. I worked in only 2 companies. In one, JRD Tata said what he said. I've just read it out to you, that I exist for the community. If you take out all the Angrezi and look at the core of what he said, Tata exists for the community. The behavior of the leaders of Tata have continued to be that way. They are not paragons of virtue. They are as flawed as any other human group of people. But by and large, the main current that is driving a Tata person is ये समाज के लिए अच्छा है. I worked in another company called Unilever. And when people think of lever as making soap and not a very important business, I would respectfully disagree. I'm not here to justify Unilever. But he managed to make a global business of then Sunlight and Lifebuoy soap in the 1880s. And the plague had not come, 1919. Forget about pandemic now. Not plague, what is it? The pandemic of 1919 had not yet arrived. So they said, William Hesketh Lever was his name. Lord Leverhulme was the titled name. Why have you set up this enterprise? And his reply was, I want to clean the teeming millions all around the world. And to this day, whatever the chairman of Hindustan Lever or Unilever may tell you, they are really cleaning the teeming millions all around the world. You can give it different Angrezi. And when the pandemic happened recently, our COVID-19, I was very interested to see why is soap, which none of us took any cognizance of as an important thing. And how does it actually work? If you look at the construction of soap under a microscope, and I was very interested to see that soap, just soap, has saved more lives in the world than the entire pharmaceutical industry by addressing infant mortality. Now, I'm not an expert on these subjects, but I say if I'm working in levers, and I'm a pensioner of levers, I feel a sense of elation and pride. And my elation and pride is mine. You may say, Pagal aadmi hai. He should not be proud of these things. But your pride is what elevates you as a human being. The work you did in your lab and the great finding that you came upon, it might not have shaken the whole world, but all of us have a footprint of our impact. And that footprint of impact should be there in every employee. And nothing makes me prouder than to see almost every employee of Tata's, I can't say I met all of them, feel proud. कि आज मैंने काम किया है. Company made more profit, but a large proportion of that is going to the trusts, which in turn will create the TIFRs and the rural development and the water and sanitation projects and so on. How many people can say that with pride? कि मैंने भी थोड़ा एक ईंट रखा उस पे. So purpose is very important. The second P I want to touch upon is progress. What constitutes progress for a nation or society? Is it just GDP growth? Is it just startup entrepreneurs? You know, people who are left thinking, the left and right in politics is confusing to a person of my background and perhaps to many of you. Left-minded people will want institution builders to always think of the poorest. And right-thinking people will say, you should reward those who work for it and deserve it. Both are right. JRD Tata, whose birth anniversary yesterday, was asked once in a television interview in the mid-80s when television first came to India. He said capitalism is under attack. This is 1987 or something, you know. Is Tata capitalist or socialist? And that is available on YouTube, this particular interview. He had a French accent because he was born in France to a French mother and his father, Parsi father. He said with his very French accent, he said, you can call me what you want, capitalist or socialist. But I think we are the world's first socialist capitalists. I think that was a brilliant answer. He just said it spontaneously. He said, I am capitalist to the extent that I deploy capital to earn profit. I am socialist to the extent that मैं बांट देता हूं सबको. That's why you won't find any Tata guy's name in the Hurun's list or the Baron's list of richest people. Why? Actually, Ratan Tata said this, your chairman, now I think. Isn't he your chairman now? That I'm very proud that my name doesn't appear there. And if my name ever appeared on the richest Indians list, I would hide my head in shame. Because that's not what the business is all about. So, progress has to be measured with the right metrics. That's the second P. The third P, by the way, these apply as much to atomic energy, TIFR, IIT, any of them. I've just used the data that I have of a business enterprise. This obsession with people, it's very tough to do. Believe me, I have led multiple companies in multiple geographies. You're more obsessed with market share, more obsessed with destroying the competition. You're more obsessed with new product development, innovation. To be obsessed with people is not easy. In 1914, at the AGM, Annual General Meeting of Tata Steel, the chairman, at that time, it was JRD Tata, he said, the health and well-being of our operatives are our best assets. Call him a capitalist or a socialist. And I would like to see a little more money spent on the sanitation and healthy surroundings for our workmen. I mean, this is a chairman telling the shareholders meeting. He's not even saying it in the boardroom. He's admitting, aapke seva mein hai. Many decades later, in the 40s and 50s, JRD said, India needs managers. And he took steps to start the Tata Management Training Center. It's another great institution in Tata's. And the Tata Administrative Service, probably modeled on the ICS. And he made a statement in his later years, which I'll recall with great affection and humility. He says, Tata believes in leaders who lead with affection. How many leaders will say they're leading their team with affection? I can be honest. I don't think people who worked for me over the last 50 years would call me an affectionate leader. If they do, they are very generous and kind. It's an essential part of building institutions. And I would offer this third P to you as part of the menu for any institution, business, enterprise, otherwise. Pioneering. This may come more naturally to scientific establishments. I mean, Jamshedji Tata was considered a pioneer in town planning. He never had a degree in architecture. You know, after his arrival in Bombay in 1878, he acquired lots of property. In fact, his nephew, his grandnephew, that is Hobi Baba's younger brother, Jamshed Baba, used to be in the board of Tata Sons when I joined. Of course, he was an elderly gentleman who used to affectionately call me Dikra, which made me feel very good because I was already 52 and to be called Dikra was quite privileged at that time. He said most of the land between what we today know as Regal and Navy Nagar was owned by Tatas. And then the commissioner said, who's this Tata guy? He owns most of this island. And he took steps to for Tata to sort of divest or get rid of some of it. He wanted to build a Chota Venice in Juhu Beach. And the project didn't take off, but I'm just showing you the imagination of a pioneering spirit. Of course, has that been institutionalized in Tata? With humility, I would say yes. They were pioneers in the manufacture of a common chemical, inorganic chemical called sodium carbonate. It's called soda ash, which goes into glass and many other. What steel is to the engineering industry, soda ash is to the chemical industry. Aviation, not once but twice over, more recently. Software, truck manufacture, passenger cars, and now of late, EVs. And the institutions that have been set up by, with the small beginning of Tata Trust are also doing very, very pioneering work, as indeed your own institution is. Persistence. And this is one area where people blame other blockers. Very commonly, people say that's a government institution, so nothing can be done there. One joint secretary will put a phone call through. Now, that may be true. I don't know if there are any joint secretary types here. Professor Jairam probably handles the joint secretary or additional secretary. But Jamshedji Tata wouldn't give up. Lord Curzon was the Governor General here, and he scoffed at the idea of putting up a steel plant. Remember, I'm talking of 1898, 1900. One railway board chairman said, if Tata succeed in making steel to British specifications, I'll eat every ton of it. Well, he didn't live long enough to eat even anything, but he would have had a lot of indigestion if he had lived. When Lord Curzon poo-pooed his idea of setting up Indian Institute of Science, he says, what will you do with these Indians who will get a PhD? That was his concern. Jamshedji Tata said, you give Indians PhD and you see what happens. And they couldn't come to a conclusion, and he did not encourage him. He took a boat, so before the aeroplane days, went to London and met Lord Hamilton, who was the boss, if I may say so, of Lord Curzon, and said, I'm not complaining about your guy, but he and I have different views. India needs Indian Institute of Science. It was called Tata Institute of Science in those days. I think even now, if you go to Bangalore, people say Tata Institute. And Lord Hamilton directed. So those who stand up, and you have examples of that in the public space, of guys who stood up to bullying by systems which don't accept it. So his persistence was a very interesting bipolar type of persistence. On the one hand, he was a great admirer of many things British. Some of his finest friends were British people. On the other hand, that was one polarity. The second polarity was he was very influenced by Dadabhai Naoroji's view that India is being looted by the British. Dadabhai Naoroji was the original thinker who brought that aspect out. And there are many records of good friends of his. He said, I love you, but on this point, I disagree with you. That's a quality which shapers have. And I wish that we had many more. I wish I had known all this much earlier. I wish I could have tried to mold myself. Principles. When I give talks at management institutes or chambers of commerce, people say, all the stuff about honesty and so on is fine, you're Tatas. The moment you say Tata, you put your visiting card on the table, people say, oh my God, Tata. If you say Hindustan Lever, you're a big guy. I'm a small entrepreneur and my life is miserable. Once you're tainted, to use a crude expression, you don't lose your virginity twice. Once you're tainted, you're tainted. Then it doesn't sort of work. And Jamshedji Tata was so humble about his own accomplishment that on his deathbed at Neuheim in Germany, he told his son, If you cannot make what I'm leaving behind greater, at least don't denude it. It is quite a nice way, because every time you appoint a CEO or a director of an institute, you can't be assured that he'll be better than the previous one. That should be your attempt. That's what succession planning is all about. In some mysterious way, therefore, this people aspect of succession planning and this idea that principles are very important are intertwined. All these P's are connected. Remember that when the next aspect I touch upon is public. How are we doing for time? 12:25. Another 10 minutes is good. The story is very well known that Tata Steel ran into a problem of cash flows in 1920s. So what did Dorabji Tata, the son of Jamshedji Tata, do? He didn't take a flight to London or Antigua. He took his wife's Jubilee diamond and said, keep this and give me the cash to pay the workers. And when I repay your loan, I can have my Jubilee diamond back. That's what he did. That story is very well known. But people say, well, you know, that all happened in 1920. Young people say, don't talk to me about Gandhi ji and Tata. Ye sab bahut purani baatein hain. After I joined Tata's, in the year 2001, we had a very unfortunate episode in Tata Group. A company called Tata Finance went under. We had a crazy CEO whose craziness, like Partho Chatterjee in Calcutta, was not detected early enough. Luckily, there was no Orpita Mukherjee for us to be titillated. And it's a public listed company. I was sitting next to Ratan Tata, your chairman, at that time my chairman, of an annual general meeting of a company. And one elderly gentleman got up and took the mic and said, I took all my life saving and put it into Tata companies because my pension is not going to be enough. And I hope I will keep getting some dividends so that we could. Now I'm ruined. My wife says, Ratan Tata stood up and said, I want to assure you, though this is not the subject of this annual general meeting, it refers to some other company, no small shareholder is going to suffer. I stand guarantee for it. And then he sat down. And I was the vice chairman of that company. And I said, Ratan, what have you done? You have no idea whether this bill will come to 20 crores or 2,000 crores. He said, you can't have an old man get up there and say his life is ruined. He trusted us. And we have to discharge the trust. You have to do the right thing at the right time. No point doing this after 1 year. And then we started collecting all the accounts. And I was on the board. I was sitting at the table when the khata came, the bill, 800 crores. And every director supported it and said, Pagdi ki izzat hai. We paid 800 crores and I was a part of the board at that time. He was the chairman, of course, the credit goes to him. And this is what I mean by being responsible to the public. Under the Companies Act, our liabilities were limited. We could restrain it to our share capital. You could have said, here's 50 crores, ille, I'm going. We paid 800 crores. So there are many such stories. And I conclude, my last P is about profit. It is not a coincidence that profit is the last P. Most people think of business enterprises as sharks who are out for the loot. Unfortunately, that is not without basis. You just have to read the newspapers every morning and you realize that there is some truth to it. But profit really is the last P in my sequencing. He regarded profit as the oxygen of the business. You need oxygen. But it's not for oxygen that you live. Like food, you need food, but you don't live for that. And so a company that doesn't make profit has a problem. because your lungs are not getting enough oxygen, your stomach is not getting enough nutrition. So I would like to conclude, and I think I would have done the task I've undertaken of shutting up in 45 minutes. You can see that I'm so full of all this stuff, I could go on for the next 2 hours. But I would test your patience by that doing so. I would like to conclude by mentioning 4 reasons why I believe, and I gain nothing out of proving or trying to prove that Jamsetji Tata was one of the greatest Indians of the 19th century. But I want to mention 4 as a summary. First, he had a vision. He dreamt big things for India. And he executed them for the benefit of society and nation. So did people like Bhabha and Vikram Sarabhai, to whom you owe, this institution owes its ancestry. Second, Jamsetji institutionalizes business principles and he embedded them. It's like embedded software. You can't take it out of the hardware. With the result that his successors had not much choice, even if they had different ideas. Fortunately, they chose successors who had similar ideas and perpetuating those ideas. And I gave you an example of the Jubilee Diamond and the write-off of 800 crores. That is an example. There are many other examples, but I won't go into those. This is a very important aspect of institution building. Can you institutionalize it? Doesn't matter who's the director. This is the way TIFR will run, or this is the way Atomic Energy will run, or IIT Kharagpur will run. Third, it's a remarkable statistic. I have stumbled upon this. It's not very well known, but until somebody tells me I got my facts wrong, which so far nobody has, so it shall appear in my book. The measurement of which is the largest enterprise in India, business enterprise, started in 1939. And there's a publication by His Majesty's government of the largest business houses. And I was curious to know why His Majesty's government wanted to know who are the biggest enterprises. My best guess, and this is a guess, is they wanted to know who are the guys who are earning a lot of money, who may be funding Mahatma Gandhi and the Congress. Otherwise, I can't see why in 1939, when the runway was coming to an end, they would want to know this. But Tatas were on top. I think their assets were 24 crores in 1939. By 1969, India had been independent already for 22 years. And Mrs. Gandhi was obsessed, not Mrs. Gandhi, I shouldn't take a particular person's name. The government was obsessed about controlling monopolies. And so they set up a Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Commission. And they wanted to know who are the big guys, kisko pakarna hai. And they rated the big guys, and Tatas came on top in 1969. After liberalization, of course, this has now become a tamasha. Everybody gives awards, and on the front page, some Mantriji is called. It's no more bad to be rich in India. When I started my career, if you appeared on the front page of the newspaper, you would hide your head in shame. You're a socialist mindset. Today, you want to be on the front page saying he's made and the startup value which is bigger than something else. So, since public measurement and reportage began, which as far as I can see started in 1939, till 2022, Tata has always come on top, including today. Tata as a group, I'm not talking of, because Tata's strategy is to have multiple enterprises constituting a group, whereas other people do on one balance sheet a number of enterprises. Now, nowhere in the world, I'm making a bold statement, will you find that the same group, business group, has been on top for 90 years running. Not 90, 80. Nowhere. If you look at the Fortune 500 list, the changes, like you change your clothes, somebody who was on top is no more there. And that is if TIFR came on top as research institutions in year 1975 and it continued till 2075 being on top, that would be an achievement. Fourth and the last, Impactful leaders tend to be forgotten. Even the great Mahatma, when I see younger people say, well, can we talk about something new and fresh and modern? Gandhiji had a certain quintessential quality about his, I call it neoteny, to borrow a biological word. He was continually refreshed with the ideas that he came up with. If India must create she companies or she institutions, which I include academic institutions, research institutions, business enterprises, and all sorts of other things, she needs shapers. And shapers need the clay from which to mold institutions. If India does this, I think Alfred Marshall was quite right. If there are 200, 300, 400, actually we need 1,000 such institutions of high quality, which are long, sustainable, and honest. It will be Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you. You want me to?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Mahaprabhu is standing right behind me.
Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, for this wonderful lecture. And now we would like to, the lecture is now open for comments and questions. We would like to take a few questions from the audience and as well as on the Zoom. So first I will take the audience in the room and then later on we will go to the Zoom questions.
Okay.
Please raise your hand if you have any questions or comments. I'll just check the questions on the.
Maybe I'll just sort of set the ball rolling by asking a question. So, I mean, the essence of what you said, one of the things I took away was that there may be a secret sauce, but its recipe is, how to create it is sort of, not something that you can write down in an algorithm. It's something more mysterious than that. But at the same time, it's something that you do want to see happening again and again. So these two seem a little, if there was an algorithm, we'd know how to do it. If it's something mystical, it's unclear how to proceed. So it's just wondering if you could comment about.
That's a very good question. Once I have taken the position that it is not algorithmic, then you start to ask yourself the question, to repeat this, what are the kind of practices that one can undertake? And that is what prompted that research that I have, in the interest of time, didn't want to go into. When we finished that research, we've written 6 books and they're all in the market now. What we found is that there is a mindset. Shapers have a certain type of mindset. And that results in certain types of behavior. And that behavior results in certain kinds of action. So metaphorically, we said, look at the Ganga. If you see the Ganga at Diamond Harbour, it looks like an effulgent, raging, broad river. You look at it at Allahabad, it looks also very big and impressive, but not so. You go to Gangotri, it looks like a little trickle. The same for Kaveri. I come from Tanjavur district. Kaveri, you go to Talakaveri, it's so small. And then by the time you come towards Mysore, it looks different. And by the time you come to the Delta region in Tanjavur, it's the lifeline. So we compared the Gangotri at the beginning to mindset. What is in your mind results in your behavior. What is in your behavior results in actions. Actions are what people can see. Behavior is what you put into it. And we have mapped for these 6 companies. I'll tell you the companies. HDFC and Deepak Parekh, Uday Kotak and Kotak Mahindra. I'm talking about the post-liberalization companies. Because Jamshedji Tata matches that model. But you can't talk to Jamshedji Tata anymore. But these people I could talk to. So Uday Kotak, the Kiran Mazumdar in Biocon. We talked to Harsh Mariwala in Marico. How did you take an idea, convert it into a set of behaviors, which resulted in a certain set of actions, which has created a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, which generally there will always be aberrations in a company. Even Tatas have had some frauds, you know. It's not that we were all fraudulent, but we've had frauds, and I alluded to one of them a little while ago. How do you create a sheep? And so we created a matrix. Now, this is what is the closest to an algorithm. Okay? Mindset, behavior, action, 3 columns. On the horizontal side, we have discovered is a bad word in a scientific institution, but we think we discovered 8 practices. So you get an 8x3 matrix. For each of those companies, we've got such a matrix. And we have populated those boxes by interviewing various people. And now, since we did 6 companies, we have 24 multiplied by 6, 144 boxes. And then, after all, what is an algorithm? You try to see a pattern. We did some pattern making. And that's how we wrote the book. And I want to mention to you that it's not a contradiction. It showed that, like in biology again, or in botany to be precise, you have this emergence principle. That a rose becomes a bud, from a bud to a flower, when a number of factors coincidence and come at the same time. A caterpillar becomes a butterfly when a number of a woman delivers a baby, when a number of hormones and various things come together. We created the emergence principle that there are 3 things that are essential behaviors and 5 things that are optional. The 5 things that are optional, each person chooses. But the 3 things are absolutely essential. And I'll just touch upon it in response to your question. The absolutely essential, and if these three things are not happening, not to perfection, but to a very high degree of competence, then the institutionalization of that institution is threatened. First, people relations. Then I've got a lot of examples of what is people relations. The second is the ability to deal with short and long term simultaneously. Amongst managers, the most common hindrance that youngsters from my point of view, they may not be that young, but for me, a 50-year-old is also a youngster, says, I can't handle, I am so zoned out with Zoom calls and things to do for tomorrow that I can't think of the long term. And the third is critical thinking. And we've given a number of examples of these. If you have any one of these, it's not good enough. That emergence principle, the rose will not come out, or the butterfly will not come out of the caterpillar if there's a hormonal imbalance or some other factor which is not in play. And we found that there is a certain orchestrative effect, which in a sense requires a change of mindset amongst leaders in India. And I want to illustrate that through a music analog, not musical. You look at a Western orchestra. People are all sitting, be very quiet. There's no chit-chatting, no eating popcorn. And then one by one, there'll be 100 people who come and sit at their designated place. They'll all have a score sheet in front of them. And then the maestro will come and there'll be some applause. And the maestro will come and do his little jig. And then they produce delightful music. It's a great example of creativity encapsulated within discipline. If you think of an emulsion, you can have oil emulsified in water or water emulsified in oil. So they produce creativity, which is emulsified in discipline. Now look at the Indian classical music. There is no score sheet. 5, 6 people will saunter in with their Angaastram or whatever. Then they will each one go, almost a apparently uncoordinated way, tuning their instruments, right? And in a Western orchestra, there are certain times you're allowed to applaud. If you applaud at the wrong time, people give you a dirty look. In Indian, they are talking to each other. Sawal jawab. It's a very great example of creativity encapsulated within a discipline. Shapers of institutions in India need to learn how to move from creativity encapsulated within discipline, a little more to discipline encapsulated within creativity. And this is the Brahma mantra, if I may use that word, that I have learned, which I hope in some part way answers your question. Because Indians are very good at a creativity outer and discipline within. You look at the way we do science. Now, I'm very scared to make the statement because I'm sitting amongst very accomplished scientists. But the whole principle of how science made its progress, the German Revolution in the 1880s, was they encapsulated the creativity within the discipline. You could do large-scale science of that kind. And I think those are the kind of changes that would enormously help. It's not the only way to do it. Different artists have different ways of playing the music, and you cannot give an algorithm for it. But these are some of the principles. People centricity, short and long term. I always tell people, you want to learn how to handle short and long term, go and look at your mother or your sister. I am now at the stage where my daughters are raising their children. So at home, whenever they are there, I can see a lot of crying and shouting after many years. A mother is always able, again, a tribute to the she. A mother is always able to deal with the short and long term. She has to change the nappy. She has to, feed the baby. She has to take him to the pediatrician. But she's never stopped dreaming in the little interregnums of time she gets in between, whether my daughter or son will be a scientist or a musician. How do men solve the problem? He'll Google, he'll look at Dr. Spock, and my daughters tell their husband or my daughter-in-law, you keep doing Googling. She'll ring up Sheila, Shalini, Mrinalini told me this. How did you solve this problem? Tuck, 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 tuck. And she gets an answer which seems to work. It is that kind of creativity and discipline immersion that has appealed to me. Sorry to give you such a long answer, but...
No, I think that was fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful answer. There is one more question from the Zoom from Sandhya Kaushika. What are the unique challenges to maintaining vision and values when organizations grow in size?
I couldn't get the question. Repeat.
What are the unique challenges to maintaining vision and values when the organizations grow in size?
Enormous. That's the short answer. It's very easy to write vision and values, at least in companies. I suspect it's true for institutions as well. But to execute and to institutionalize is like climbing two big mountains. And again, if I have to give a smug answer in the interest of brevity, I would say leaders walk the talk. People remember for a lot of time, in Tata's, for example, this is how Jamshedji Tata did it. This is how JRD Tata did it. This is what Ratan Tata said when I asked him. And I hope that will continue, and it will be Chandrasekharan and whoever else after him. Because the tone at the top determines vision and not the piece of paper and the PowerPoint chart. So, in families, sometimes a husband and a wife may have a conversation. I've had such a conversation, so I'm not finding fault with other people. You tell your wife, you tell her in Tamil or whatever language you speak at home. When the phone rings, you tell him that I'm not at home. Okay. That militates against vision and values. The child is listening to you. He said, but daddy, you are at home. And they are small little things. And just like microcosmic forces can alter, what is the name of this telescope that has gone up now? John Hubble. James Webb. James Webb.
James Webb.
You know the story of the earlier one which went up, which had a problem. Hubble telescope. 1 degree, half degree, and you can get the wrong picture. The same thing applies in institutions and families if you're not consistent.
Yeah.
Remember, an institution is like a James Webb telescope. Its precision in terms of repetitive, consistent behavior has to be like that. It cannot be like the one in your school, college, university, where you just push it around.
That's correct. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, there is a question. Yeah.
No,
Sorry?
vision also is a critical element of the story.
Yes, I mentioned that if you don't have vision, there's no Gangotri.
No, but in the aid that you have listed, you would have thought that somehow you can element of.
No, there's a in the research we did, we found, and this may be a bit controversial, but I'm mentioning it because you're asking the question, that all this vision you can keep doing. It's the less difficult part of it.
That's true.
It is the execution. So we are focused very much on the execution and the behavior.
Because you have to know which industry to start, which will be required for the.
Yeah, it can probably vary. If there was a green over here, going back to 1941, how it must have looked, then of course you must have a vision. These buildings and all you didn't visualize, but what kind of research they will do and so on. So I'm not saying vision is unimportant. It's far more important of the course and the gradient of the river down the line, rather than where the Gangotri started or where the Talakaveri is. That's the point I'm making.
Understood.
Water will gush out under the laws of physics.
Yes.
How it will flow is also taking the laws of physics. But what matters is the law, how the laws of physics are played out later on. That is it. Both are important.
So I
Yeah,
have a
please go
question.
ahead.
Every family is kind of an institution, right? So
You can't hear you. Is your mic on?
yeah, can you hear me? So I'm saying every family is kind of an institution. So how come Tata it has made several institutions that as well as a family as an institution, it is so much better, or we can say has been very much like they have shown a legacy. Like every generation has done something for the society, as compared to like why this is not visible all over the families we see around, why they are not able to make such kind of institution.
If I've understood your question right, you're saying, in your opinion, Tatas have had a consistent form of leadership. Why is it not replicable elsewhere? Is that your replicated?
Why is it not so general? Why is it like you said that it's very rare to make such institutions?
Community as a whole is far more visible than the community contributions of other companies.
Yeah, especially the companies which are owner driven, that kind of versus the one
I'm
which
just
is
talking in general. Why such
Okay.
kind of institution?
The only comment I can give, I've very often been asked, especially by foreign correspondents, when I was in service in Tata, one of my roles was to speak to the foreign correspondent. Is there a religious angle to it? Of course, Tatas are also owners, but they've given their ownership to the trust,
But they are also religious, I guess.
Pardon?
Parsis, they are also religious, I guess.
No, I'm not saying they're not religious. That's not my point. My point is there a religious basis for the way Tatas operate? I've talked to some Zoroastrians and so on. I have not found any. You see, Zoroastrian religion apparently says Huma Hukta Havarashta, which means good thoughts, good deeds, and good actions. If you go to Bombay House, you will find that in the foyer. It's like saying Satyameva Jayate. When Jhutameva Jayate is the norm in many other parts of but if that has been your guiding principle, maybe that's a difference. I don't know. I can only say that from an analytical point of view, the world's problems cannot always be solved by analytical techniques. But we have tried to do that, and we have found this 8x3 matrix which we hope will form some basis. Like all matters of research, it's only the first foothold, then you must find a second foothold, a third foothold.
I didn't get my answer, I guess.
You didn't get your answer? No, you are asking me to comment on why other people can't be like Tata. That's very difficult for me to comment.
I'm saying it is about education. I think like how there must be some you pass on your genes to the next generation. For example, you said the DNA to the institution. So it's also kind of a DNA you have.
Yeah, but I'm hesitant to use word like DNA because although they're all called Tata, they're not sons of each other.
Yeah, but
Each other.
everyone could be so much visionary.
They have passed on values. If you're calling values as DNA,
yes,
then they have passed it on, they've institutionalized it. That's what I've been speaking about. But it's
I'm comparing it with like there is so much like this country has so much population. How come it's not possible with other people as well? Why is it so rare?
yeah.
The issue comes up is because various, like all families, each family had a different perspective of what is important. So depending on which institution or country you're talking about, their emphasis has been different. And you may or may not like them. That's a different part of the story. The second part of the story is that the way the community of Parsis work, there is always a sense of community and contribution to others, which many other cultures lack. And there are various angles one can give to that, religious angles, the way the religion society is structured. But essentially, there is that ingrained values that he talked about, which makes all the difference.
Oh, thank you.
No, that's fine. If it will satisfy them, I'm happy.
Okay, thank you so much. So with this last question, I would like to thank our speaker today, Mr. Gopalakrioshnan, for accepting our invitation and giving us this wonderful insights on the topic of great importance. And I thank all sections and all members of TIFR for their help in organizing this, all the auditorium staff, technical staff, and all the other departments. And also thank you very much to all the people who are on Zoom as well as those who came here. So thank you for your presence, and we look forward to welcoming you to more TIFR Alumni Association events in the future. So thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We'll go together.
Okay, cool.
We'll put this in the.
Yes, sir.
This can also be put away, then I can
Yes.
walk hands free.
Yes, sir, definitely.
Thank you.
We'll put this in the car.
Yeah, my car hasn't arrived yet.
I know.
We'll keep it at the
Yeah.
reception and when
We
you
will make sure that it goes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we did a reasonable time. No, you did a.
Sorry, Sandeep, Mike. सर ओके बेटी ये व्यक्ति जाएगा ठीक है अरे गेंदा है अभी इधर
हे सगळं सेटअप करून घ्या आणि त्याच्यानंतर माझं एक काम ते 2 स्टँडीज लावलेले आहेत माहितीये एक इथे आहे आणि एक रिसेप्शनचे ते दोन्ही स्टँडीज पॅक करून माझ्या ऑफिसमध्ये द्या जर मी नसेल ना तर माझ्या मागे ठेवून द्या ठीक आहे पण ते आठवणीने करणार आणि जिथे जिथे पोस्टर लावले
ब्लॉकला वगैरे लाव
ते एंट्री वगैरे नाही जे मोठे मोठे लावले ना